might need to get closer to the mic. Is it green? Is your light green?
Hello? Hello? Okay, we'll use this mic over here. Okay, one more time. We'll try this one more time. It looks like it's about 3 minutes past 3 on the 8th of June, Tuesday, the 8th of June, commencing our Finance Committee regular agenda. This is call to order. I'd like to open up this time for committee and or committee comments before we start.
None here.
Seeing none, I'd like to open this up for public comment. Okay, we have somebody dialed in, but we don't have anybody calling in. Okay, very good. Then we'll go to item number 3, fraud risk discussion.
Yes, there's nothing to report.
Okay, thanks, Ty. That's good news. On to item number 4, first quarter 2021 investment reports.
Okay, first item, and it should be in your packet, is the quarter ending March 2021. On the 31st, we had $3,212,471 restricted cash in the bank, and just under $400,000 restricted.
I'm trying to follow you. What page are you on? Where are you?
It's a quarterly investment report. Yep, that's the one. Starting with the first, just up at the top.
Okay, gotcha.
We do have investments in LAIF at $1.37 million. And Kern County Treasurer holds $8.8 million of unrestricted and $446,000 in restricted. And then we have the remainder of the 2018 COP project funds of $6.8 million. So total unrestricted funds for the district, $13,419,000 and $7.68 million restricted for a total of $21 million. And then below, you can just see our reserves and how much we have currently in each one of those reserves.
Could you explain on the restricted reserves? The COP funds, I'm assuming we can spend on almost anything that is a capital improvement that we will depreciate over a period of time.
Correct, and that's why it's under restricted, because it is only for capital.
Only for ca-
Yeah.
What about the other two, the 399K and the 446K? They're restricted, but to
Right.
what extent are they restricted?
So the $399,000 is our solar loan funds. That's the remainder. We're working on that project out at Well 35 for a new solar plant. Well, the solar plant that's going out at Well 35. So that can only be used for that.
Mm-hmm.
The $446,000 is a assessment district, 87-1. So it's only for projects that were listed in that assessment district. So
Is that like a pipeline or a
right, it's infrastructure.
infrastructure?
Yeah,
But it's got to be in a certain area. of
correct. Yep.
Okay. Now, I asked that because later on I'm going to have some questions regarding the budget for next year and how much
Sure.
Money that we have for various things.
And similarly on the unrestricted, that's truly unrestricted. Or
Correct. That can be used for water district functions.
Okay. How does the 8.8 million of Kern County, where's that generated from?
So that's going to be several of these reserves we
below.
have down below. Our
Okay.
vehicle, computer, emergency reserves. That's what that's made up of.
Okay, and those are basically tax-based
It came from rates.
gifts from us or to us?
No, that's just, we put so much aside every year for those replacements and those activities.
Okay.
So it's unrestricted, but we have designated it for those activities when they're needed. You'll see that come into play in the budget a little later. We We did take some out of the capital reserve for some of our projects.
Okay. The Kern County Treasurer comment or reference is the part that's got me a little confused.
They just offer, yeah, a better yield than LAIF typically, so that's why we,
It has nothing to do with where the money came from.
Okay,
right,
It's
it's
just a depository,
okay.
savings fund, if you will.
you know.
Thank you very much.
And one thing you should be aware of, if we haven't discussed it before, is that even though all of these unrestricted funds really are unrestricted, we have internally a ordinance or a resolution, I'm not sure which, that divides the various unrestricted funds into not restricted, not obligated, but I don't know. what word-
Designated.
Allocated would be a good word, yeah. And then after all that allocated, then we come to what we call the unrestricted cash. But if we needed to use any of it or all of it on anything, it is ours from a legal standpoint. It is ours to use as we would like to.
Okay, now we come for board approval.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
good enough. Thank you.
So that's all I have on that one.
Thank you. So that's it for investment reports. On for item number 5, financial statements for May 31st, 2021.
Okay, through May 2021, we have actual revenues of $13,131,000, which is 3.1 million greater than our budget of 9.9 million. Expenditures, we have 12.36 million actuals, which is 478,000 better than our budget of 11.8. So our net, we have a positive 767,000, which is 2.6 million greater than our budgeted net of 1.9 million. For capital expenditures, we have expense 4.1 million. Just over 2 million of that is funded by the COPs, and our debt service principal to date is just over 900,000.
And that's for 11 months.
That's for 11 months, correct. Then we have the following graphs and charts, just to,
Oh, let's wait for a second on that. Mel, are you going to ask the public for comment first or the board?
The outline of our agenda doesn't offer public comments on each of these specific events, so how do we handle that?
Well, we'll either before or after the board
Have we been doing that?
members talk, then we always, for
Right.
anything, we allow public to comment.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and do our board comments? Well, no, since we want to hear from the public and give the chance to the board to comment on public. Are there any public comments, Amber?
I remind the board that there is a about 15-second delay when you say that to when they hear it.
Okay. Okay. All right, please continue.
okay, after that, it's just the graphs, if you have any questions on that, just the visual representation. I do prefer the last graph just because it shows last year too, where we were at this time. As far as revenues, we're at 13 million. Of course, most of that due to GSA collections, but quite a bit more than the just under 10 million we had in 2020 at this time.
I have a few
I was going to say, go ahead, Stan.
questions. I was comparing this sheet that we have in front of us with the budget that was sent out earlier last week, or earlier this week, recently anyway. And I understand why the actuals would not be the same as the year-end estimate, but I don't understand why the 2021 approved budget wouldn't be the same for the budget documents and the current document. In the one case, the budget says the income for this year was originally 9.98, and the data that we got for the new budget is 11.97, and then the expenses on the budget handout was 12.8 million, and here it's 11.8 million, and I'm having a hard time trying to reconcile what
Because
why
this,
there's a difference.
this budget represents the budget through 11 months, not the full 12-month fiscal year budget.
Oh, well, that
So,
was
so each
simple.
month you'll see those numbers change because it's just it's the
Yeah.
budget through that point.
Okay, the budget, sure. That
Like,
makes a lot of sense.
So like we anticipated being 1.9 million upside down at
Got
this
it.
point,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
we're actually
good. Okay, well, I'm glad there was a simple explanation. There is one item that looks sort of odd in the total capital contributions. The year-end estimate, granted still is a month away,
Mhm.
is 2.2 million, and in the actuals, it's 194,000. Is there a,
Yeah, the actual is 1.9 million.
Oh.
You're looking at the net operating income of 194,000. It's probably just those rows are flipped between the two.
3, 4. Oh, the line change,
Yeah.
yeah, you switched the lines. Ah, very.
Not trying to be tricky, that's just kind of how it came
Yeah.
out.
Okay, it was a test and I didn't pass. Okay.
That's okay, no harm.
No, that's fine. Actually, I'm glad. Now, last month, I said one of the things that I wanted to do is try to look at these numbers and interpret, or actually have you interpret what these numbers meant in terms of what we would expect to see at the end of the year in terms of both the net position and the unrestricted reserve. Can you look at these numbers? Because again, it went back to my question about 4 or 5 months ago is, what do these numbers really mean in terms of looking at our budget as we do on a monthly basis? But now we're 11 months through it,
Right,
and what do the numbers, how should we interpret the $767,000 both from a net position and an unrestricted reserve standpoint?
well, obviously, we're gonna have an increase over what we had projected when we first laid out this budget 12 months ago. I think the closer representation, of course, is gonna be that year-end estimate that we'll see in the budget. That year-end estimate is tracking based, it's taking these numbers into account and adding in, our projections for 6 to 8 weeks, because we prepared it the initial work was done a couple weeks ago. We're gonna end in a better place than we began, or where we estimated. How much that's gonna be, it's more what you'll see in the budget.
Okay, well, I guess in my mind, at 11 months, we're saying that we're in the good from a net position standpoint, 767,000, but over the next month, we go to the year-end estimate and it's $2 million.
Right.
Quite a change.
The big reason for that is the accrual that happens at year end for revenue. Though we see 11 months here, we're seeing approximately 10 months worth of revenue. Because that revenue that's earned in June and paid in July has to move back into the previous fiscal year.
Really more like 10 and a half, right? I mean, we.
10 and a
we-
half, 10 3/4, yeah.
Yeah.
It's right in between 10 and 11 months.
Okay, I'm always looking at the numbers and saying, okay, there's a lot of nice numbers there, but what do
Yeah.
they mean? It's
Yeah.
really- Because, they look a lot better at the year-end estimate than not that they look bad now. I mean, being in the positive 767,000 is a good deal. So we would expect, well, let me ask a question, I don't wanna, we would expect our net position, even if it's 767,000, to go up this year rather than down like it did the year before.
It'll probably go down due strictly to the fact that we have capital expenditures. Though, because they're not reflected in this net revenue increase because they're not technically an expenditure. They're an increase in asset. They're not an expenditure. And well,
But net position takes into account both the capital and the reserves. I mean, it's
it takes,
both,
it's pretty
right?
much
So
your,
the capital, if we invest in capital, that will increase our, net position, right?
yes. Yes. Okay, sorry, I'm talking cash. That's my bad.
Yes, yeah,
But
okay,
yes.
now that goes to the second question. From a standpoint of, the unrestricted reserve, I guess my feeling is that there's about $2.1 million of cash capital. But on the other hand, there's 3.5, oh, you changed it to 3.2 million for the depreciation on here, but it's 3.5. in,
This is only 11 months.
Thank you. Got it. You're right, yeah.
It'll be around 3.5 at the end of the year.
3.5, okay,
Yeah.
but that 7.6767 number is also gonna go up. So, is it not reasonable to expect a fairly significant increase in the, unrestricted reserve? And
Cautiously, I want to say there will be an increase. I know that they always do, in GASB, when you're accounting for liabilities, especially in the pension area and the other post-employment benefits, they make adjustments at the end of the year that typically affect that bottom line, and it's typically to the negative. So cautiously, I think we will have an increase, but once we get those actuarials from the state, from PERS, and apply those, it could have some impact on, I don't anticipate major impact, but there will be an impact.
Well, is the cash capital gonna be going up? Are we gonna spend additional cash capital this month?
Yes.
Significant amount?
Probably not significant.
Because right now we're at like 2.1 million,
Yeah.
but we've got a fairly big buffer.
There'll be some in the, we're getting started with those tank replacement projects. There'll be some costs that go there. Like, not significant. I think we're done with most of our mainline replacements, and
I thought that came from our COP.
some of them do, some of them are funded by cash.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Good questions, great answers. All we ready to move on to item number 6? General fund and capital projects budgets?
Okay, so what you have in front of you is the proposed 2022 general fund and capital improvement budget. I guess we take one at a time, start with, with the operations budget. We have columns here, the first showing the current budget for 2021, the projected year-end estimates, followed by the proposed budget. You'll see an increase in revenue from I think the delta is based on budget to budget, so from 12 million to 17 million. That's a big jump. 4.6 million increase is from the GSA fees pass-through, because we will have a full year of the replenishment along with the pumping fee. I guess I should start with the first line, the general water sales. We budgeted this at 94% and added in the 3% increase. And we have the pass-through. We have water service revenue of 372,000. This will include anything from your turn-offs to your turn-ons to your delinquencies. We have capital contributions. It's an increase from last year's budget, but it's $1 million less than we have in the current year. Most of that reduction is from the state disaster reimbursements, where we will be finished with that. We'll have all the money in from there. We still anticipate activity on the construction side. I know we've got the new hotel that'll soon be applying for connection. We've got the new shopping center over by Walmart that'll be applying. Plus, we factored into not as many new residents as we had this current year, but a good portion. So you'll see that budget at 1.16 million. And then our non-operating income, this is like our interest income, our miscellaneous. We have that at 117,000, which is a $50,000 reduction due to the end of Cash for Grass and a little lower interest rates. On the expenditure side, we have another jump again, 4.8 million. So going from 12.8 million to 17.69 million. And once again, the lion's share of that is from the GSA funds. They come in, they go out. We also have an increase. We have some increases in liability insurance, quite a large increase in legal services. We do have some PERS costs, and I believe we will be having a new GM, so the current one that leaves will have some accruals that'll be cashed out as well. Overall, our net will be a negative 678,000, which is 148,000 better than the current approved budget of 827,000. You'll see what that ends up meaning is we're just not fully funding our depreciation, so we just need to keep an eye on our maintenance, make sure we're not falling behind on that, which I do not believe we are currently. So that's the overall view. Questions on there, or we can go through the cash flow statement. That kind of gives you a more of a health look as far as finances. So that next page, I think it's page 3. Page 2 is the same as page 1, just with some of the comments on why there was the deltas. Page 3 is the cash flow, which begins with the beginning cash. We estimate a beginning cash for 2022 of 22,412,000. Then we have the cash receipts. Operating revenues of 15.7 million, Capital contributions, this will not match with the previous page because some of those contributions that we recognize as revenue are not cash. As in when there's a dedication of a line that a developer has put in, it is recognized as revenue, but it's not cash. So that's why you'll see the difference in capital contributions. And then we have the non-operating revenue, which, as said before, is essentially our interest and miscellaneous items that come in, surplus. So for total revenues of $16,666,509, these are cash revenues. Expenditures, we have the list of operating expenditures. What you will not see here is depreciation. Depreciation is an accounting entry. It's a non-cash item. So total operating expenditures is $7.5 million. The capital improvement projects, this you won't find on the previous page because this is not an expenditure, even though it says expenditure. We have $8.9 million. Miscellaneous non-expense, $5.1 million. Conservation, alternate water. Then we have our debt service principal, which isn't found on the previous page because it's a reduction in liabilities. So that's a $1 million. And then long-term debt. Total expenses are $24,152,000 for a net cash flow of a negative $7.4 million. How does that $7.4 million break down? Well, if you look up above, we have capital improvements of $8.9 million. So if we were not to do any capital, our operating at least would be a positive number. Ending cash, just under $15 million. We have the reserves that fall under that, an emergency reserve. We reduced the capital replacement reserve by $1 million, and that is to cover the tanks, the new tanks coming in. We did not have enough COP to cover those. And it was an important item due to the destruction of the previous two from the earthquake, so we're taking that out of capital replacement reserve. We have all those other reserves, and then a depleted COP bond projects fund. You see that last item there is zero because it will be completely spent. So we end with an unrestricted cash balance of $5 million. With that said, we do meet our debt service coverage. This is when we go out and we sign the contract for the certificates of participation. We have to meet certain requirements. One of them is the debt service coverage of 1.2. That means if you take the operating revenue less the operations expenditures, including the conservation and the alternate water supply, and then you divide that by the sum of your debt service principal and long-term debt, it needs to come out of 1.2 or higher. And it comes out at 1.26, so we're covered on that front. We still meet our fund reserve target of 6 months of O&M, but we do not meet our capital replacement target we set just over a year ago for the one booster, one tank, and that. So we have
Didn't meet that originally either.
We didn't. That was a goal we were going to work towards, but once Cal OES said they wouldn't cover the tanks, it had to be done. That's what that money's there for. Sorry, what's that? So we have 2.5 currently in the capital replacement reserve, and we have a goal of reaching the 10.8, because that covers one booster station, one well, one tank, and those three, just the three. And the rest of this is just the detailed line item accounts. real kicker putting together this budget is we had originally put a placeholder of 500,000 for legal services, which was a 200,000 increase over what we had budgeted for this current year. And we put that in, 500,000 as a placeholder, waiting for Jim to come back with the number that he anticipated for next year, and ended up coming in at $975,000. So we had to add that in and shave off other places to try to meet that debt service coverage ratio, because we had the financial funds if we had to, but we would not have met the debt service coverage. And then we'd have higher legal costs when the bondholders come after us. I think we had a budget of 300,000, and if you look at the year end, we're coming in this year at anticipated.
I think 500,000 is what's in the document.
500,000. No, we had it at 200,000. We had to, this last year, we're coming in at 500,000, anticipated 500,000 this year, and we, a budget of 975,000 for next year. Yes. Yeah,
So that's an increase of 475
from year-end estimates.
in the year-end estimate.
Yeah.
And I guess that's, I think, something we need to talk about with the board, because quite frankly, it raised this last year from 200 to 500, and yet, in terms of what we've actually accomplished and what I think is going to be ahead of us, my feeling is that that might be a little low when you consider everything that we're going to be doing this year. We hired a new lawyer, and we would expect but you're saying that Jim gave you the 975
Yeah,
number?
he met with Markman and went over all the, is it Markman?
No.
No, that's the
Doug.
GA one, Doug Everett. Yeah, Everett?
Yep.
I think it's Everett,
Same guy.
somewhere around there. Doug.
Doug.
He met with Doug, and this is the number they felt comfortable with. They came in higher, and we said, whoa. They said,
See,
well,
I would have expected them to come in higher based upon what I think I'm hearing
yeah.
from the discussions we've been having.
But we asked, we went with the bigger number, and we made it work, and then he came back and said, well, actually, I'd be comfortable here. We were a little conservative on this end, so he felt good at 975,000. We said, well, there wasn't much to cut after that anyway, so.
And we can't use last year's performance of missing targets as necessarily a projection of the future, because we had no idea of this bump up of legal needs halfway through this year.
And that's why Don reached out to Jim and Doug to get a number, because we could throw any number we want on there. Wouldn't be very good.
Yeah, and they should have a better feel for,
I would hope so.
with the experience that Doug has
Yeah.
with adjudications and such, so. Okay, so basically going in with $1 million estimate for legal fees this year. On these other numbers, do you typically look at last year's actuals and then just accelerate them a little bit with inflation, or how do you come up with projections of what you think each of these columns would?
Right, we look at the last couple of years. I think we take 3 or 4 years and look at what kind of what the average is, then we look at what we're planning to do next year in our areas, what projects. Is this something we're gonna be performing at the same level as we were this year, or is it something we need to accelerate or decelerate? That kind of each one on an individual basis. As far as my areas, I'd imagine you guys look at them the same way.
We do the same thing. We prioritize what we need and break it down that way. And for this year's budget, we just cut back some things that need to be done, but may not need to be done this year exactly.
It seems like one of the biggest challenges well, at least in my mind, for home projects, you know, just trying to estimate what material costs are gonna be for different projects. I've been thinking
yeah.
for the house, it's, I don't know how Mr. Cordell, Director Cordell is doing it as a business,
Yeah, luckily we're not dealing in lumber.
right? But even steel and,
Yeah,
yeah,
You couldn't even guess.
no,
no.
You could double it, but that still wouldn't be a good number.
I think the new house constructions right now, they won't even give you a price.
Yeah.
They'll just say, well, we'll build it. We don't know what it's gonna cost yet.
yeah, it's the labor
Yeah, just
plus,
give us a blank check.
they'll give you labor plus materials.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Okay, so that helps, and then, and that's held up in the past, I mean, it looks like it holds up.
Yeah, it holds up. We typically come in under budget, but you never know. We're trying our best, and I think once again, we'll probably come in under budget, just not as much under budget. You know, things like, leaks and repairs and that, you can't really estimate them.
Mhm.
So we try, we probably scaled back a little bit for this next coming year, and hopefully we're okay, but that's a hard number. Sometimes we're closer to the estimate, other times we're quite a bit below it. Just depends on the year.
Right, right, and this year with uncertainty about inflation and things,
Right.
it's not gonna be this, as it has been in the past. Do we get numbers from the state, or do we make estimates from, you know, federal projections? How do we?
For CPI and that,
Yeah.
yeah, we look at those.
Okay.
Especially because I know our the labor contracts have that built into it as well, CPI index and,
Okay.
you know.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, I've got a number of questions. I noticed that on the capital contributions, we went from 587,000 to 2.2 million, and I'm assuming that was the earthquake, funds that we got from the state, is that correct?
That was part of it, as well as this last year, we just saw an explosion in new house construction, as well as we had the labor camp.
Hmm,
I don't know if you should call it a labor camp, but
man
man camp.
Actually sounds better.
man camp, which, you know, was $250,000 of that. So
Yeah.
we've seen quite a bit of new construction. We had several big dedications, as well as contributions from the state for the Cal OES.
Okay. Now, I noticed that you know, there's an increase in income, but there is not a noticeable increase in expenses due to that. And I'm assuming that's because a lot of it is capital expenses that actually go on the cash flow chart. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you don't see it. So that $2 million is, that you see down there, the year-end estimate, that's a little bit artificial in terms of, you know, we really do spend the money. It's just that we don't spend it on the operating budget.
Right, it's offset by depreciation, because depreciation is not a real spend. I mean, that's how you expense your capital.
Well, yeah, I mean, we depreciate all of the equipment and facilities. Do we also have to salvage or excess some of those tanks we had to totally replace, not just in repair? Do we
Yeah.
also go into our capital, or whatever schedule it is that says how much things are worth, and just totally excess?
Not on the tanks, because their useful life was over a while ago,
Oh,
so they're
it's already gone.
it's already gone. It's off the depreciation
Okay, so
table.
so besides depreciation, there's no additional reduction in the capital that we have from the,
Right.
okay. Going to page 2. I noticed on the very first line, the water sales, you say budgeted at 94%. Now, I kind of assumed that was 90% of the dollar value as opposed to 94% of usage in terms of units of water or not?
It's a reduction in the actual, in the consumption, because the ready to serve doesn't change.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
understand the ready to serve. I was talking in terms of actual water. Are we assuming that the income from the water went down 6% or that the usage went down 6%?
The income, because even if the usage goes down, we don't know if it's gonna be tier 3 usage that's being reduced, or tier 2 usage, or tier 1. So typically on that number, we just go over the overall usage revenue.
Okay, so it's a revenue decrease as opposed to and I guess I've been hearing a lot of comments from our customers that would lead me to believe that we could have an actual real decrease in 6 to 8% of usage, which would mean that you could, depending upon how things fall between the tier 1, 2, 3, and 4, 6% usage reduction could be an 8 or 10% income.
It's possible.
Do
But what we have been seeing as far as our production numbers and consumption numbers is we haven't been seeing a decrease.
Well, it's early, yeah.
It is
We've
somewhat
only had
early.
one hot month.
Yeah,
And people who, especially I use an outdoor use, they can't just instantaneously change their habits. I mean, it's gonna be 6 months or maybe more than a year before
right.
the current cost increases really start taking effect. But would you be sure when you're going over this on Monday night, make sure that everybody understands that it's a 6% of the revenue as
Right.
opposed to 6% of the use. And
Absolutely.
I personally still think it's going to be more than that. Not that I have any, my crystal ball's probably no better than yours. But I want to make sure that everybody on the board understands that is what's being done.
And that's one of the things we track. So during the year, if we see that, we're trending the wrong way, that's when we'll come back to the board and we'll readdress it, either a mid-year budget change or sooner if it's needed, but yes.
Yeah. Also on page 2, it says, on water supply, some salaries move to capital.
Right.
I'm assuming if our workforce is doing construction as opposed to us hiring a contractor to do it, in this particular case, what labor is being switched?
Sure. We have this across multiple departments, and water supply, because we're doing tanks and boosters and that, they will be contributing some of the labor force to that. So that would come out of expenses and go to capital. Same with engineering, field services. I'm trying to think if there's.
What about the water haulers? Are we doing the construction on the new water
Portions of it.
portions of it?
Portions of the bulk station, yeah, that will also be covered. Water supply, we'll have some capital hours there, and maintenance. Yeah.
Okay, and on page 2, I think I sent you an email asking you to add the same numbers that we've got on the normal budget sheets, the capital expense, COP funded, and debt service principal.
Those are on the 3rd page as well.
On page 2, page 1 and 2 are the same.
Right, I'm just saying on the 3rd page, we have those numbers. If you
Oh,
look-
yeah. I think it would be nice to have it, together so that people
Okay,
don't have to jump back and forth.
no, we can add
But
that.
I think you're right. Well, except for my first question, we'll see. On page, I guess it has to be 4. No, page 3. the beginning line is cash, the 22,412, and I would like to see a 2021 cash flow. I think every year in the past, we've always had both the current and the
Previous.
future years in terms of cash flow.
I can add that in.
You could add that in, and then also annotate next to it how much of that is bond funds. Because I think we learned today that there's $6.8 million of COP funds total, or something like that.
Yeah, we anticipate there being just over 6 million left at the end of the year. Some of that will carry
Oh,
over,
okay.
but yes. So,
Yeah, because it, as of this sheet here, it was 6.8, and you're saying that's gonna go down to closer to 6.
yes.
Okay, so whatever the right number is, if you would annotate,
That'll be on the, so when I add the cash flow for 2021, that'll be on there. And you'll be able to carry those numbers right over.
okay, but I guess next to the beginning cash on both, I would like to see annotate in parentheses or something, how much of that cash is COP? You see what I'm saying? The $22,412,575, some of that is COP, and that's the only number I really care about, because I can subtract it.
Yeah, you'll have it in the previous, because I have a line item for bond project funds, so you'll have that in the previous. In the 2021 cash flow, there will be a line item there just before ending cash, which is that same 22,412,000. That'll delineate each of these reserves as well as the bond project
Oh,
funds.
the bond project thing is zero.
It's
a
zero.
cash here,
Yes,
okay,
but it'll have it on
yeah,
the
I got it,
6
I
million.
got you. Right. And in the middle of the cash flow, you know, you've sort of explained how the various reserve funds or allocated funds have changed. But obviously, they're going to be different for the 2021 than they are going to be for the 2022. So if you'd go through and
That-
probably the same thing you did.
Yeah, it'll be on the
now,
previous page,
is
yeah.
Why did they change?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's also, I think, important that we state whether or not we're complying with the either ordinance or whatever we.
I got you. The resolution.
And I think all of those are objectives anyway, as far as I know, but I guess the question is, are we meeting the objective? You know, but I don't want to get too rigorous regarding the requirement, you know, but, and then if you would show how you generated your debt service coverage, because I went through and I couldn't get your number. I mean, obviously, you put something in one column different than what I put in.
Okay.
And what I want to do is see which ones you used.
Sure.
Because I tried to go back to the original rate studies that Mark put together and
Mhm.
identify, you know, what goes, you know,
What, in
on
what
top,
bucket?
what goes in the bottom, what do you sum, you know, and I couldn't come up with your number.
Okay.
Now, if you'll bear with me, I want to go through a couple of the more detailed sheets on page
Just as a
7.
question, Stan, I'm just trying to make sure that Ty has a feel for the total, what you're asking for. Can he annotate chart number 3, similarly as he has annotated chart number 2 with the addition of the column of previous information that you requested to satisfy your questions. Did that make sense?
I didn't understand what you were,
So if we're looking at page 3 of the package that Ty has given us, the one that starts with cash flow projection, you had a number of questions that you were asking on that chart, which included an additional column of information to compare to previous year projections or actuals, whichever. But also you had some questions about how debt service calculations were done and such. Can he take that chart number 3, and annotate it similarly as he annotated chart number 2 with comments to the right about what each of those
Oh.
selected, would that be
yeah, and that
sufficient?
was what I was suggesting. On the other hand, I don't want to make it, off to the right. That was what I was going to suggest. But as long as he puts at the bottom of the 2021, rather than the dash, what the current level of the project bonds are, then it's pretty obvious at the top of the current page 3, it's going to be the same number. And as long as he puts a number at the bottom, it's the difference is what's going to be a part of the capital improvement projects. If you see what I'm saying, it's a fairly simple addition, subtraction. So I think I can follow that fairly easily. But if there's something in addition you'd like,
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure that your request was understood well enough so that Ty can respond to it.
and I doubt if Ty is going to go through all these detailed lines either here or with the board. There, that would take a long time.
That would be a lot. yeah.
I do have a few comments or questions, and looking at page 7, that's the arsenic plant expenses. We've been talking to this new group about some type of a new filter. I'm not sure exactly what it is, quite frankly. But going through all of these lines, I didn't see anything that looked exactly like.
Okay, so the filter has the media on top and then has an under drain below that the water goes through after it's been filtered. That would be a capital expenditure to repair those. So you're not going to see it in this operational budget.
Ah, okay. So then the question is it in the capital?
It's not currently in the capital. That would be a project if we look at it and we find that it's something we want to do, we'd have to bring back to the board.
Well, based upon the weekly highlights that I've been receiving, people seem to think that it's going to be useful, positive, and will work. So I guess my feeling is we should assume that it is. And certainly we can talk about it at the board meeting. Do we add it or don't we add it?
Yeah, I don't think we have a cost yet either, do we?
We don't have a firm cost yet, and it may be something that we can add at a mid-year review, so.
Well, on the other hand, we don't have a firm cost for anything in our capital costs, do we? Seriously?
Couple of them, but yeah.
Couple of them, couple out of a couple hundred, yeah. Well, my feeling is we need to bring it up as a topic on Monday night. And I don't care if you put it in or don't put it in for Monday night, but want to make sure that it gets discussed.
Well, yeah, we can definitely, if that's the way we go, we can decide at the board meeting to add it in. It's not a big deal.
120K for both, 6K per, that was sort of the impression I got.
That was the initial estimate, yeah. And I can get a better estimate before the board meeting come Monday.
Okay.
On a related, are we satisfied with the warranty that they had offered in front of us, agreeing to fund that?
They have not put anything in writing yet, so.
Okay, so that's holding
So we
things up
don't
for us to
know.
actually make a decision,
Yeah.
And if they use lumber, then throw that out the window.
right?
Okay, and something I had identified when I went through it was that legal estimate. I think if you would make sure you highlight that and explain where it is, how it came about.
Oh, I will.
and Because, it's a lot of money. On the other hand, I want to make sure that we, I mean, all these numbers are estimates, but,
That is a good estimate.
But-
we want to make sure that we don't underestimate it.
Yeah, and because there might be a tendency to compare our misestimate last year and forecast forward a similar misestimate, it should be important that we mention that Mr. Worth
Yeah.
provided the
Yeah.
estimate
And
this
we
year,
know
not
the
us.
environment's gonna be different
Right.
next year than it is this year.
The good news is you'll have them sitting here to ask.
Right, we can give noogies and all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff in case there's, yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of self-serving on his part, but nonetheless, yeah, I agree. Boy, sometimes that's what you gotta do. On page 12, I didn't see the urban water management plan under, was it engineering, probably? No, yeah, no. Well, under non-operating expense miscellaneous, I saw general plan. So I assumed that the urban water management plan would go in the same general area. Maybe, maybe not. But I don't see it. And there's also a separate document called a water shortage contingency plan. That sounds an awful lot like a GSP. That we need to at least give lip service to make sure that it's covered. Because it's part of the urban water management plan.
Yeah, it's part of the urban water management plan, and that's due this month.
Well, the draft is due this month.
Yeah.
And then also in sort of similar, I see the general plan EXP. What is the general plan EXP? What's the EXP part of that?
Probably expense.
Oh, expense. Oh, okay. Well, based
Yep.
upon what I saw last December on the general plan, that was supposed to be a draft.
Yeah,
My feeling is 75K might be low.
well, this 151,000, I believe, actually includes the urban water management plan as well. 75 is what's left in the general plan expense after this year's expenditures. And I don't, like I said, 151,000 plus 75 is more than 200,000. The urban water management plan is also in this year-end estimate number.
Okay. And, well, I guess it needs to be clear on the sheet if you could just take
Yeah.
And I guess, again, my feeling is based upon the draft of the general plan that I saw was very rough. And I haven't seen the urban water management plan, and it's a fairly thick document. I think that might be a little optimistic to think that we're gonna finish everything, all of those things for 75K.
Yeah, I think we're there.
In any event, I'd like you to bring that
Okay.
up.
Are those being worked within staff or are those being contracted out?
Traeger and Stewart.
Craig and Stewart? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they've been around, seems forever, but they're very knowledgeable of our valley, our district, and, under conservation, my feeling is we need to do a good deal more in terms of conservation. I'm not exactly sure what, but we know that we are gonna have to reduce our water usage. and it would be good for us to try to help, our constituents and our ratepayers.
I can tell you the thought process behind this is we would prefer to cut here than cut the maintenance budgets any more than we had to cut them to make budget. That and we said, the GA fee could probably do a pretty good job of conserving for us.
Oh,
I mean, I understand where you're going, but it was one of those, priority lists.
Mhm.
And we said, that's
Well,
kind of the
yeah.
first thing.
yeah, no, I totally understand that, but I think we need to have the discussion at the board level.
Okay.
Yep, and as an example, Dawn's mentioned a few times that the number of new people coming in and registering wells, even though we've been advertising about the need to register as wells, has dropped off. Conservation has kind of, we're doing good, but we're not getting bang for buck in terms of increased conservation advertisement versus increased conservation, are we? I mean, it's kind of,
Right.
we've kind of plateaued there.
Yeah.
Well, that will get their attention, no question about it. Unfortunately, that money doesn't go to us.
Right,
It
right.
goes to the GA, which is, so it forces people to conserve, but what that's gonna do is reduce water usage, which is going to reduce, not increase our water, revenue. And so, it's sort of the worst of both worlds is, yeah, they're gonna conserve, which is the problem we had back in 2011, is we asked people to conserve without raising the price of water. And, yeah, it created a big problem. And this has the potential for doing the same thing, is forces beyond our control are gonna reduce the water usage, but, but that's why we're gonna discuss that 6% thing when we get to that point with the board.
Right.
Most of this stuff, most of the board doesn't care about. Well, I mean, there's not a lot of policy issue associated with most of this stuff.
Mhm.
Actually, most of our fixed costs are uncovered in the surcharge.
So in any event, my feeling is we need to do more in conservation. That's just one person's thought. The other thing is, let's see. Oh, I'm gonna get to in just a second, the capital, budget, or I guess you probably should go through it first, but.
Yeah.
But it turns out that there are studies listed in the capital budget.
It's very minimal. I think one study.
Well, there's a brackish water resource study, which is not funded this year, and then a groundwater storage study, which in my mind, neither study should be a, capital expense, and that they ought to be in the operating. I mean, just like the, general plan and the water management plan, it's a study, you can't depreciate it.
Certain circumstances, if it leads to a project, then you can. It becomes part of the project cost.
The final design, I would certainly agree.
Yeah,
but-
even the studies do.
Even the study.
The feasibility study is part of
Okay, and I
capital.
guess I don't know what the trade-off there is,
Yeah.
in terms of what's best benefiting us in terms of, if we have the option, put it here or here, which way do you wanna do it? And I'll defer to you.
So we put it in here if we think it could lead to that, and then if it doesn't, and like the feasibility study says, don't do it, then we move it over into, we expense it out.
Well, there's, under alternate water supply, there's two things, that I wanna make sure that we address. One is the wastewater recycling effort that is ongoing, that we're working on with the GA. And right now, I mean, I guess you could compare that with the 30K that is in the, well, it's called a groundwater storage study, which is kind of related to the wastewater, if you're talking about injecting, But my feeling is we need to broaden the scope of that whole study and make it a wastewater recycling study, and then you can put it wherever you want to, you know, but 30K is not gonna pay for the job. The original GA quote was 500K. They wanted to spend 5, which I thought was outrageous. But I think 30 is maybe on the other side of that. The other thing, and again, sort of under the topic of alternative water supply, is exploration for new water in our aquifer.
So for the groundwater storage study, actually in 2021, there's 34,000 that's going towards it and 30,000 next year, so we're getting up to 65,000.
I guess I didn't see.
It's in the project to date column, the blue column,
Oh, yes.
and that's what we,
What was actually done?
right now Rambo is doing, Rambo.
Oh, that's that other
That's the
thing.
study they're working on.
That's the different water storage issue.
Yeah.
Okay, which is totally separate from the wastewater recycling
Right.
thing. So then in that, you're familiar with what we're asking, Ram? We can talk about it offline. But, so that means instead of modifying this thing, that really is a groundwater study, storage study, that is, how much water do we have in the basin? And that, you know, that was funded last year, and I think is very valuable. And it's gonna be important one of these days. But, so then there's, under sort of the heading of alternative water supply, wastewater recycling, because we have to pay Krieger and Stewart for working with the GA. And one thing we don't want to do is let that get out of control and have the GA take over it completely. We need to stay involved.
So that item is actually under we put it in GA, or the expense miscellaneous under GSA. There's $50,000 there. Let's see.
Which page are you looking at?
So that would be on, page 12, second row down.
Oh,
It's
GSA?
not, that should have a better title on that.
Oh, 50,000? That 50,000 in line 2?
Yes.
I don't care where you put it. I would like to be clear as to what
Is what it
what
is.
it really is.
Yep.
Yeah. But that is a study. And then the other two things having to do with alternate water supply, those are two issues that the board's really gonna have to address, because they're strictly policy.
Right.
But my feeling is we need to, and by the way, I'm not sure that 50K is enough for the wastewater recycling.
I believe they've already started on it, and some of those expenditures are hitting on this current fiscal year.
Yeah. Well, I think Krieger and Stewart put together a good outline for the tasking that needs to be done. Mel, you've seen that, haven't you? But depending upon how much of that we do versus what the GA does, and of course, if the GA does it, we're gonna pay for it anyway. Right. You know. But the water exploration needs to be somewhere. And, so that was all of my comments on the operational budget, and I've got a couple on the capital budget, but let you, talk through it first.
I mean, we're ready to move on to the capital? All right. This one actually doesn't have as many line items on it this year, probably because we're at the end of the COP funding. So this will be page, so it's right after the graphs. I don't know if the graphs have page numbers, they don't. So it looks like this.
Yep, got it.
The first section under water supply, we have two items for 2022. We have 100,000 for 10 mag meters, so 10,000 apiece, and the 3.3 million for the gateway booster. The gateway booster will include both funding from COP. Anything COP doesn't cover will be from the cash.
And that's actually two boosters.
Two boosters, yeah, the whole station. As far as water distribution, we will have the new service installations that we have every year, 9,000. 10,000 for solar at the Springer tank. And that is to be able to run the services at the Springer tank, my understanding.
Just so you are aware, there's no actual power run to that tank site. It's pretty remote. So the SCADA system is ran by solar. So somewhat valuable.
It's going out.
It has batteries.
We do have two mainline replacements scheduled, South Gold Canyon and Karen, 150,000 each. We have our yearly fire hydrants. We put a placeholder 7,500, but as you see,
Are you still on page one?
yeah,
In which line?
fire hydrants, third from the bottom. Third from the bottom.
Third from the bottom. Okay, fire hydrants, yes.
Yep. That's just our, every year.
No, those are not, that's not fire hydrant maintenance. That's an additional fire hydrant. So adding a fire hydrant to the system.
We have 4 tanks, reservoirs, 4,540,000. This is on the next page. Once again, this will be COP funding, and when it runs out, it'll be cash. We have end-of-life meter exchange. These are all our meter bases going back to the 70s. We are slowly going through and replacing all those. We find as the meters get older, of course, they're not recording the water. So we're giving away free water, if you will. So this is going through route by route and bringing those up to the useful life of a meter is typically 20 years. So we got a lot of use out of these meters. So this is one of those that we need to get caught up and then stay on top of it every year going forward. Bulk station, 100,000. I imagine some of this will actually hit in this fiscal year as we're getting close to the end, but this was to make sure we cover it. Yeah. In the technology, we have miscellaneous computer purchases. This is for printers or scanners or PCs or whatnot that fell during the year. Probably won't have to dig too much into that this year, as we replaced almost all of the PCs this last year, but it's a placeholder in case it's needed. We do have the Springbrook Cloud upgrade. That's our financial system. That is to bring it up to date. It is behind by several updates. And this will actually migrate it to the cloud. They will automatically apply updates, and we should be up to date forever here on out without having to pay for the upgrade fees. It'll also allow us to run reporting for the Water Smart system, so we can keep that up to date as at least more up to date than we do now. And then we have 15,000 for a replacement server that we schedule every 3 years, just so we never fall behind and have to purchase 4 or 5 of them at once. Vehicles, we have several, I think there's 4 or 5 vehicles we have scheduled to be replaced next year for $120,000. Keeping our fleet up to date so that we're not spending more money on maintenance than we have to. Miscellaneous capital purchases, this is kind of the catch-all. If for some reason we missed some capital item that needs to be purchased. I think we, 12,000 is all we spent last year, and that was for, yeah, it might have been for the big plotter. Can't remember.
We're still on page 2 now?
Yeah.
Towards the bottom.
And then page 3 is the 30,000 for the groundwater storage. So overall, this is a total of 7.84 million. 6,083,000 of that is COP. And that leaves, what, 1.7 million? Why do I have two?
I'm sorry, the total is 8.9,
That's where I'm getting off.
4.9. and there is 6
So six,
million of COP,
yep.
right?
That's why.
And that was confusing to me. When I went through and it was marked yellow, I assumed it was total.
Yeah.
So I went back to the last numbers I had, which was 7.8 million COP, and we've been spending it obviously,
Right.
but it would be nice.
Yeah, so that's 6,084,000, that's COP, and whichever one of those projects spends the COP first, then the other's getting the higher share of cash. We could,
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, we
Yeah.
gotta pay for all of it, one way or the other, and,
and so 2.8 million is the cash funded.
Okay, just a quick question, so I'll understand the mechanics of this. We start off with a certain amount of money that's available, and then there's a prioritization process of selecting what we're gonna do with it, and this is the end result that you're recommending that be
Correct.
of highest
Yeah.
priority in these areas.
Yeah,
If-
one.
If we had an infinite budget, would there be a whole bunch more stuff in item 22 that's
There-
not being funded?
There's a couple items that we actually pushed out to the following year.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the one that's 700,000 for, what was that for? Well, one of the main lines, I believe, Springer line?
East side 4-inch laterals.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's a couple that we've pushed out and,
The Springer to Gateway Tank is an important line, but that got pushed out.
Okay,
well,
so that,
I-
if we had the money, we would have moved those into 2022, but we,
right, so we stagger it within our cash funding that we can,
and then do we capture, some, I'm not looking for anything elegant, but there's a risk in doing that, right? I mean, if these things need to be done, but we just don't have money to do them today,
right.
what's the risk of having to push it off to 2023? And is that something that the board
The
should-
risk that comes along with the Springer line is it puts stress on the system. Putting in the new line in would help the tanks float on each other a little better. It broke last year, I think 2 years ago, and it just puts stress on the system as far as getting water to the east side of town.
And then when we do have a break that isn't budgeted, that expense shows up somewhere else in here that, again, pressurizes your budget, so.
Right.
Do we typically just not do things that were budgeted beforehand, or do we figure out how to carry an additional expense that isn't funded into the future, or?
It's one or the other, yeah. That's a discussion we have. Do we put off something else, or do we just try to fit it in?
And those come to the board, or are those decided here?
If it's to fit it in, then yeah, it comes to the board.
of course, that's part of the reason we have a fairly good amount of reserve too. I mean, and that's what it's for.
Sure,
On the other hand, you don't want to use it either,
right.
you
if
know,
don't
so,
have
I mean, it's a trade-off. Has there been any discussion among the staff about what's the next year that we're going to try to get another COP? I mean, it seems to me at some point in time, we're gonna stop pushing things to the right and say, we can't do this with our yearly budget or operating budget and cash capital. We're gonna have to borrow, which is what we should be doing, because it's gonna last for 20 or 30 years. should be paid for over that period, especially if the interest rates stay down. So if, I mean, if, so I guess going back to what the real question is, has the staff said, okay, these are the projects that are coming up, and this is the year that it makes sense that we want to line up our funding in terms of getting our debt coverage, you know, to the point where, you know, we're going to be in good shape for borrowing money.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that go into that. Typically, when you have a new issuance of bond, there's a penalty for refunding early. That's typically 10 years. You have 10 years, they don't want you to be refunding these bonds because they're investments to them. So typically, you can't refund it within 10 years. You have to have the rates to support the new debt service schedule. And like you said, you have to have projects lined up kind of in mind for that. I think we're probably 6 or 7 years out before, you know, we
Oh.
start looking at actually doing another issuance.
Well, we wouldn't have to refund anything when it comes right down to it, right? I mean, we can just pay off the COP 18, is it? You know, on the, as scheduled, so the interest rate is actually pretty good.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's
And
no
do an
need to
additional
refund
issuance?
any of that.
You're talking additional issuance?
Yeah.
You can do, once again, we have to have the rates that support it, and our rates
Right.
don't support
Well,
it
I mean,
right
the
now.
question is what project, I mean,
Yeah,
hopefully it should be project-driven.
it should be, yeah.
Hopefully the new general plan will kind of lay that out a little better.
Oh, that, yes, that's an excellent idea. Yeah,
Once we get a look at that, we'll have a better idea of,
yeah,
what's to be done in line.
yeah. And the draft, is the staff looking at a draft of that this month or next month? Wasn't that what I was,
Should be pretty soon.
pardon?
It should be soon. I know they were
Hmm.
waiting for some, data from
Okay.
SCP that they finally got, a week or two ago, so I'm expected to look at that.
Okay. Well, yeah, but, you know, like Mel was pointing out, you don't want to just keep pushing things out and out and out.
Right.
Try not to do that.
Oh, I did have one question. On the third page,
Of the capital improvement.
total future source of supply, under the right side,
Looking at the operations budget, or?
no, the capital improvement projects, 140,000. It doesn't seem like it add up to,
That's just a bad formula.
Fix the formula.
Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, that's what it looked like, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Not that it probably makes any difference with anything, but. And if you would somewhere put a note or another asterisk indicating that rather than just the yellow that says denote COP funding, also put a double asterisk that says total COP funding is 6.1 million or whatever it is, so that people don't get the impression that anything that is yellow
It's
is
100%.
100%
Gotcha.
COP.
Good catch. I guess are we on to delinquent accounts report now, Ty, or do you have something else to say about the previous two?
Yeah, we can do
Sections.
delinquent accounts now. That's all I had for the budget.
All right, thank you.
All right, so May, we would have locked off 217 accounts. A reduction in 3, but as you can see, our past due amounts went up to 125,000 from 114. So. And as I've said before, I don't see this moratorium on lockoffs ending until after the recall election.
I have a question.
Yeah,
Is the reduction in total accounts due to people just closing their account or?
probably.
Okay.
We'd probably send it off to collections then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I still think we need to look into putting it on the tax rolls. Because you
Yeah.
put something out on, and try to get it
the,
the other way, you might get lucky and get 30 or 40%.
the problem with looking at the tax roll is you may have renters that are responsible for it and you're paying the property owner. I mean, that's just one thing to consider. Because most of these, I can tell you, are probably tenants.
Oh,
Hmm.
well, I guess, speaking as a
You have few-
rental owner, yeah, I appreciate that. Although it may be possible to distinguish between renters and owners.
In the system, I think we can. I think that's something we
Because
can.
I'd much rather get 100%
Oh, me
off
too.
of 80% of them than 30% off of 100% of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
even though it might not be until there's a sale on the property.
Or their escrow pays it, right?
Maybe property owners should just pay the water bill.
I think that's a great idea.
But actually, the total is still down from what it had been.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's actually, grand scheme of things, not a large number for our revenue and percentage of revenue compared to other water districts in this
we've
state.
been lucky,
A lot of them are hemorrhaging right now.
you know.
Hmm.
But our employers have been keeping,
Yeah.
laid off a lot of workers either, so.
Right.
Right.
It's been good for everybody.
A stable environment for us in contrast.
Yes.
Okay, future rate study objectives.
In the, benefit of time, could we postpone that until next meeting?
I think we should because there was some ongoing information that Don referred to at the last meeting that doesn't seem to have been brought forward.
That was, well, partially that, but it was also the, will serve. So
Okay.
we've got both of those things that we need to do, but, yeah, we're already
Yeah.
well into our,
Yeah, I expected the meeting would be a little long because you had a lot of material to go through. And I appreciate the attention to questions and
Yeah.
your patience.
oh, yeah,
It's been
it was more important that we got good answers to what we were asking than to worry about something that
good.
obviously is not going to be a critical issue this month.
Exactly, and there's not much to make progress on today anyway, is there? How about accounts payable then, Ty?
Okay. The first one, which would be for May 11th, with a total of 377,000. Big items on the first page, we have the 313,000 that we generously paid the GA.
And 91 cents.
And 91 cents. The second page, let's see, big ticket items. We have the Aqua JPIA, which is our insurance, for 77,000. NG, 175,000. That's for the solar plant out at well 35. Ferguson Waterworks, 21,000. That is, we purchased several meter bases for the exchange program to bring those up to date. We have Krager and Stewart for 89,000, working on a multitude of projects, well 35, booster station, yeah,
To the general plan and the
general plan.
management plan.
And then right under that, we have McMurtry, Hartsock, and Worth for 36,000.
Now, does that single line item account for all the legal expenses? or-
That's all the legal, yeah.
Wait, for Worth, but not for
Doug and the others?
Doug.
Yeah, we don't have anything on this check run for
Okay.
Doug.
Okay, yeah, these are just checks for that date. Okay, so didn't send
Oh,
an
okay,
invoice in.
they
that
haven't
we
submitted
wanted
an
to
invoice,
pay.
okay.
Okay. Because I know they don't work cheap.
The next one for May 26th is a total of $40,329.92. Really, the only outlier here is on-stock construction for 27,000. That's doing the paving of one of the service line replacements. I can't remember which. It's not Ward.
Over by Albertsons?
It might have been Ward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's Ward. 13,822 for Santa Fe Wind Water Works. That's just our normal parts. Yep. And this one does need a motion, a recommendation.
I'll move we approve the, what do we call this?
Accounts payable.
That, yes.
Okay, and
Second.
I'll second that. Want to vote?
I don't know that we need to.
Any final comments from the board or from the public?
I'd just like to, make sure, Ty, when you go through these things that you, especially on the policy-related issues, a lot of the things I was talking about was just make it clearer what something is for, but there are probably a half a dozen issues regarding policy and where we want to spend our money and how much do we want to spend it on. Those the board really needs to wrestle with.
Yeah, and I appreciate taking the time to help us understand the thinking. The real gist, I think, to many of these questions is that I'm sure these numbers are, for the most part, accurate, right? I don't
I
really
would
have
hope so.
mind questions on those.
With the exception
But
of
it's-
140,000.
Well, except for the 140, yeah. But having those numbers staring at me in the face, it would be very helpful for me to kind of have something in the back of my pocket that says, should I feel good about this, feel bad about that? And
Yeah.
I'm still getting my arms around that. And I know some of the questions that Stan was asking were similarly based, is that, it's like rudder. Are we on the right vector? And is there something we should be pulling it back this way or pushing that way? Or even if there's any levers to move it, that would be nice to understand what those are. But thank you very much. I appreciate your patience and for the extra time. And since we're the finance committee, I guess you can always submit a bill for the extra time.
I won't pay it.
Right, and I'll call on it that we adjourn at 4:35. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ty.
Uh-huh.
Thanks, Ty.